Hey friend, please subscribe and like the video. 1 second for you, big deal for me. My name is Elena Ward, and for most of my life I believed I had married a good man. David was calm, reliable, the kind of husband everyone admired, especially me. We met when I was 27 in a small art gallery downtown. I was still trying to make a name for myself as a painter, selling small canvases for barely enough to cover rent. He was already successful, a financial analyst who wore quiet confidence like a well-tailored suit. He told me he loved that I was different, that I saw color where others saw numbers, and I believed him. For the next 20 years, we built a life that, from the outside, looked perfect. A 2-story home in Connecticut, a daughter, Sophie, who filled the house with laughter, vacations twice a year, dinner parties with soft music and expensive wine. But inside there were cracks I refused to see. David wasn't cruel. He was distant, controlled, always busy, always with one foot somewhere else. When I'd ask what he was working on, he'd say, "You wouldn't understand, love. It's complicated." So I stopped asking. It wasn't until Sophie left for college that I started noticing the silences, the way he'd stay in his office after midnight, the way he'd close his laptop whenever I walked in, the way he smiled less, and when he did, it didn't reach his eyes anymore. I told myself it was stress. Men his age carried pressure differently, but one night I realized it wasn't pressure. It was guilt. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had spent the whole evening cleaning, an old habit when my thoughts got too loud. David was upstairs, supposedly asleep. I went into his office to drop off some papers he'd left on the kitchen counter. That's when I saw it. A black flash drive sitting beside his keyboard, labeled with a single word, EW, my initials. At first I smiled. I thought maybe he had scanned my old art portfolio or made something sweet, a surprise anniversary project. But when I plugged it into my laptop, the smile vanished. There were folders, each one named after dates I recognized. The week of Sophie's birth, our 10th anniversary, my first solo gallery exhibit. Each folder contained documents, emails, contracts, transfers, all in my name, all with my forged signature, and all linked to accounts I'd never seen before. At first I thought there had to be some mistake. Maybe he was helping me manage my old art income. Maybe those transfers were legitimate. But the amounts, they were massive. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, moved between offshore accounts under my name, money I never earned, never touched, never approved. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through the files. Each transaction was signed E. Ward, my name, my forged signature, my life used as camouflage. I sat there for a long time, listening to the soft hum of the house, the sound of a clock ticking in the hallway. It felt like everything I had built with David was suddenly paper-thin, a life drawn in pencil, ready to be erased. I unplugged the flash drive, shoved it into my pocket, and went to bed without saying a word. When David kissed my cheek that night, I pretended to be asleep. His breath was warm against my skin. I remember thinking, how many lies fit inside one kiss? The next morning, I acted normal. I made him coffee the way I always did. He smiled at me, thanked me softly, and then he left for work. Same suit, same routine, same illusion. The moment the door closed, I called my friend Rachel, a lawyer I'd known since college. My voice trembled when I told her, "Rach, I think my husband's using my name for something illegal." There was silence on the other end, then her calm, steady voice. "Elena, don't panic. Bring me everything you have. We'll figure this out." I drove to her office with the flash drive burning in my pocket like a secret I didn't want to own. Rachel went through the files carefully, her expression tightening with each scroll. Finally, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled. "This isn't small, Lena. These aren't just fake accounts. He's laundering money through your identity. If this goes public, the IRS will come after you, not him." My stomach dropped. "What can I do?" I whispered. "First," she said, "you move everything that's truly yours, your accounts, your art royalties, your personal savings, into a protected trust under my supervision. Then, we document everything on this drive. You don't confront him yet. You wait." So that's what I did. For the next 3 days, I lived in quiet panic. I pretended nothing had changed. We ate dinner together. We watched the news. We talked about Sophie's new classes. And every time he smiled, I wondered, does he know I know? By the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to understand why a man who once claimed I was his world would risk everything to betray me. So I did something I never imagined I'd do. I followed him. That Friday, he told me he was meeting a client downtown. He left around 6 p.m., briefcase in hand. 10 minutes later, I was behind him, tailing his silver sedan through the city streets. He didn't stop at his office. He stopped at a hotel, and when I saw him step out of the car, laughing, with a woman in her early 30s, elegant, confident, holding his arm, something inside me went very, very still. It wasn't rage. It was realization, the money, the secrecy, the EW folders. He wasn't just stealing my name. He was building a life, a future, with her. I didn't cry, not that night, not even when I saw him touch her the way he used to touch me. Grief didn't come in waves. It came in silence. I sat in my car across the street, watching them walk inside the hotel lobby hand in hand. Every second stretched like glass, thin, fragile, and ready to shatter. When they disappeared through the revolving doors, I finally exhaled. That was the moment I stopped being the woman David could deceive. I wasn't his victim anymore. I was his reckoning. The next morning I met Rachel again. She studied me for a moment, then said quietly, "You look calm." "I am," I said. "I finally know what I'm dealing with." Together we made a plan, not for revenge but for justice. We gathered every document, every transaction, every false signature. Rachel hired a forensic accountant to trace the funds. Within 48 hours, they discovered over $1.2 million tied to shell companies, all registered under variations of my name. David had been siphoning money from his firm, hiding it under my identity, then transferring it into joint accounts with that woman, a financial consultant named Vanessa Cole. It was almost poetic. He had built a second life using the same letters that spelled mine. Rachel's eyes hardened as she scrolled through the files. "He's not just a liar, Lena. He's committed fraud, corporate and personal. You can destroy him." I looked at her. "I don't want destruction," I said softly. "I want truth." And that's when I had the idea, the one that would change everything. David's firm was hosting its annual Founders Gala the following week, a black tie event where he was scheduled to speak about financial transparency and ethics. The irony was too sharp to ignore, so I decided to attend. Rachel helped me prepare everything: digital proof, signed statements, backup files stored with her firm. If anything happened to me, everything would go straight to the authorities. The night of the gala, I stood before the mirror in a black dress I hadn't worn in years. It fit differently now, not tighter, not looser, just stronger, like armor. When I arrived, the room shimmered with expensive perfume and false laughter. David spotted me from across the hall, surprise flickering across his face. He walked over, all charm and control. "Lena," he said smoothly, "I didn't think you'd come." "Neither did I," I replied, smiling faintly. "But I wouldn't miss your speech." He chuckled, that same confident tone I once loved, the same tone that had lied to me for years. When the lights dimmed and he stepped onto the stage, I took a deep breath. He spoke about integrity, about honesty, about leading with values. And as he said the words, I felt something shift in the room, as if truth itself was holding its breath. When the applause ended, I walked toward the stage. Rachel's voice echoed in my head. If you want to end it, do it cleanly. I climbed the steps, took the microphone from the podium, and faced the crowd. I'm sorry to interrupt, I began, my voice calm but firm. But I think it's time we talk about what transparency really looks like. The room went silent. David's smile froze. I reached into my clutch and held up the flash drive, the same one labeled EW. This, I said, contains a record of every transaction my husband has hidden for the past year. Money laundered under my name and stolen from his own clients. Gasps rippled through the crowd. David's face went pale. Elena, he hissed under his breath, what are you doing? Telling the truth, I said simply. Security came forward. People whispered. Cameras flashed. And as I stepped off the stage, I didn't look back. Because the truth, once spoken, didn't need an audience. It needed peace. The days that followed were a blur of noise, headlines, investigations, statements. David was suspended within 48 hours. By the end of the week, he was under federal inquiry for embezzlement, tax fraud, and identity misuse. People who once toasted to his success now whispered his name like a warning. And me? For the first time in years, I slept through the night. Rachel handled the legal side with precision. Every accusation that could have fallen on me was dismantled by evidence from that flash drive. I wasn't a suspect. I was a survivor. Still, the silence of the house was heavy. Every corner carried a memory of what I thought love looked like, the smell of his cologne, the faint indentation on his pillow, the echo of laughter that no longer belonged here. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the maple trees, Sophie called from college. Her voice was gentle, cautious. "Mom, are you okay?" I hesitated. Then, for the first time in a long while, I answered honestly. "Yes," I said softly. "I think I finally am." There was a pause. "I saw the news," she whispered, "about Dad." "I know." "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I told her. "He made his choices, and now I'm making mine." After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a blank canvas I'd pulled out weeks earlier, the same one that had been waiting for me to paint again, waiting for me to remember who I was before I became someone's shadow. For hours I just sat there. Then finally I dipped my brush into the paint. Not soft colors this time. Bold strokes, deep reds, midnight blues, gold streaks that cut through the darkness. It wasn't a painting of anger. It was a painting of rebirth. Of a woman who had walked through fire and learned she didn't need anyone to rescue her. Months passed. The investigation ended with David pleading guilty. He lost everything he built, not because I ruined him, but because lies always ruin themselves. As for me, I started selling my art again, quietly at first, then publicly. One morning, an email arrived from a gallery in Boston. They wanted to host a solo exhibition. Truth in Color, they called it. Standing there on opening night, surrounded by strangers who saw beauty instead of pain, I realized something. Freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sounds like your own heartbeat after years of silence. As people admired my work, I overheard one woman say, "These paintings feel like someone who lost everything and found peace instead." I smiled, because that's exactly what they were. Before leaving, I looked at the final painting, the centerpiece. It was called EW. The same letters that once stood for betrayal now stood for empowered woman. And in that moment, I understood what survival really means. It's not rebuilding what was broken, it's painting something new from the same pieces in brighter colors. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's dignity.